Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, it's been a very interesting weekend to be watching satellite data, and I want to show you here sun up to sundown on Sunday. And what I'm watching here in particular is this coastal low. I'll watch the sunset on it right there. I'm talking about this feature right here. Very peculiar to see something like this time of year. You could make an argument that it's even taken on some tropical characteristics. It is not going to be a threat to the Carolinas. Could put some snow down in parts of coastal New England, but this is going to be one that I think a lot of folks are going to take a second and third look at once it goes through. Now, most of our attention as we go forward in this forecast is going to really start off with what's changing in the Pacific Ocean. We've been under this very, very strong zonal jet stream flow for a while, and that is starting to break apart, and it's going to really have an influence on what we're going to be seeing over in North Carolina. But as it stands, we had some much cooler air that came through this weekend, and you can see how that cold air leaves the coast and gives you this nice clear slot in through here, and then these cloud streets that show up. That's a kind of a telltale sign of some cooler air. Now, I say that's cooler air, but when you just look back at, in fact, let's look at temperatures. When you look back at the temperature pattern we've seen since the start of the new year, we could say that most of North Carolina is having like a top 10 to top 15 warmest start to any year on record. Again, these records go back to 1893. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find any place in the country right now, and this includes the Canadian Prairie as well, that is shown below normal temperatures. And many places are having incredibly hot start to the new year, like Texas and parts of the Great Lakes states, and getting up into parts of New England. Now let's come back to that precipitation graphic, because we need to spend a little time thinking about this. The strong onshore flow, which we know has been kind of targeting this area, and we've just seen a tremendous amount of precipitation coming in, especially to parts of California. You can see that it's missed north of it and it's missed south of it. We've had a lot of these systems come in, and then they just make this hard turn or cut to the north. And that's been one of the reasons why the closer you get to the Appalachian Mountains, which saw some snow recently on the backside of the most recent low, these fronts that have come through here have really failed to get clear to the East Coast. And so therefore, we've been drier in these three climate reporting districts along the East Coast here of North Carolina. So the big questions we got to ask is, what about this pattern's changing? What's going to continue? What's not? We need to look out as far as we possibly can, which means we're going to finish this particular video with a discussion about La Nina and the potential transition away from it here very, very soon. Okay. Now, what's been going on since the beginning of this new year has been that the jet stream has been configured such that it's coming off of Africa, going over the Middle East, coming across China. It's then really not had too much of its flow being impacted by the Himalayan mountains, and that's actually important. Okay, so it's made its way out off of Japan, come all the way across the open Pacific, and came right into the West Coast, and it's come weakly across the rest of the country. And we talked about this last week. In order for the East Coast, specifically the Carolinas, to get those big winter storm systems that can bring in a lot of moisture, we have to have high amplitude flow. We have to have systems that cut in pretty far to the south, and then we have to have big blocking ridges to the north to make them make the turn like this. And when they do that and they make that hard turn closer to the coast, that's when we get the moisture that's needed. So to relieve that drought that we're developing here on those three climate reporting districts along the coast, we need to see a change in this pattern. Now, there is a change coming, but I want to just show you something about how unique this is, this extended piece of the jet stream. Because if you take this same map and say, well, show me where the parts of this flow are anomalous from, are different from normal, you get this. And this has been the extension of the Pacific jet that's come in, made this hard turn into California, delivering just a tremendous amount of water to California. Now, if we look back over the last 7 days, there are some places in Northern California that have picked up more than my color bar allows, so well over 10 inches of precip. Now, this would be liquid equivalent in the mountains. I'm sure you've seen some of the news or maybe some of the pictures on social media of just the sheer amount of snow, like, for example, in Tahoe and nearby cities here, where they're measuring it not just in feet, but in tens of feet. Now, how much of this is going to really go a long way to relieve California's drought? It's actually going to go quite a long way. Unfortunately, when you get this much precipitation all at once, a lot of it does tend to run off because you have just a tremendous amount of flooding. Now, I got asked last week, what does California need in order to finish this winter season with adequate moisture? I said it needs what it just got, again, needs so double what it just saw, and it needs it spread out from now all the way to April. Let's not bring it in one big helping. Let's bring it in slowly over the coming days and weeks. Now, this same pattern did set off that severe weather outbreak we saw last week, and right now we're well over 300 reports of severe storms, 45 reports of tornadoes, and we had some nasty weather that came into North Carolina. In fact, I was in Raleigh and I was in Charlotte, and those storms that came through here were pretty rough. In fact, I was flying between those two cities, and it was one of the rougher flights I've ever been on. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a multi-million miler with American. I fly a lot, and I consider it fun. Most people hated it, okay? So there were some rough storms that came through here, but notice again, along the coast, this is where our driest area has been, and we've been wetter the farther to the west you go across the state. That's been a constant. I want to look at it one other way. Let's look at the last 30 days in terms of percent of normal precipitation, because I want to draw your attention to another area. So yes, we've got this dryness here. It's extended all the way into Georgia and parts of Florida. There's actually been a swath in through here that's actually missed out as well, but I want you to come back to the southern plains. Now, two things have really hit this wheat crop hard. Remember, just before Christmas, Kansas got hit with several hours of temperatures below -10 Fahrenheit. Some of them got down to -18 Fahrenheit. And then since then, part of the hardwood winter wheat belt has just not received moisture. Not just since then, but going all the way back to the middle of December and before that. So this has been an area that has been just completely vacant of precipitation, and the models continue to rob this particular area. So I want to keep a very close eye on that. That's will likely be one of the longest holdouts of drought in the United States. Now, speaking of drought, we got a new drought monitor last week. The total amount of drought is now down below 66%, which means we've gone from 86% to 66%, and it continues to drop. And one of the biggest improvements has been in the west, where the snowpack, this is one of my favorite sites here from NRCS, where the snowpack is in some places sitting between 200 and some places almost 500% of normal right now. Now, where the moisture is targeted means we're leaving some places out of this, like down here in New Mexico. We got to build this snowpack up. You can see through parts of the Front Range, then getting up here to the northern Rockies. There's a lot of places up here that are still okay, but they still need quite a bit more to come in. Now, let's talk about the change. This is what the jet stream looks like right now. And I'm recording this on Sunday evening, so you got it early in the morning on Monday. And what you're looking at here in the color coding is just the speed of the jet stream right on top of the North Pole. So it's continuing. This is the strong jet streak still coming in here. But over the last few days, a large area of high pressure, okay, if you can see, this is Russia. A large area of high pressure is built out of Russia, and it's pushed down toward into China, like toward Tibet, through Mongolia, right into this area. And what that's effectively doing is it's changing the momentum of the jet stream in this area, and it's going to force the jet stream to retract. Now, I want to show you that retraction by just playing this forward relatively quickly through this week. Because by the time we get through Wednesday night, Thursday morning, in fact, let's just park this out here. I'll take y'all that to Saturday morning. That's a good spot, or Saturday midday. The jet is now stuck here. Not stuck. It's screaming here, but stops. And what happens is it splits again. Now, that's very common when there's a La Nina, split flow like this. And then we have this stronger piece of the jet that goes from Texas right over the top of the Carolinas. We need to talk about what that might mean once we get fully into next week in terms of our precipitation. Now, we have reason to believe that this particular pattern the atmosphere is going to go into. In fact, I'll just take you out there and park you 10 days from now on January 25th. We don't think the jet is going to re-extend anytime soon, which is going to lead to some high latitude blocking here. That's a ridge that pushes up toward Alaska. Now, what we'll be waiting on is to see if there's any corresponding shift in the jet stream behavior over the Atlantic. Because as it stands, there's some sort of ridge, like a subtropical ridge here, that's keeping us mild, but not yet fully letting the atmosphere take these systems and race them up the East Coast, which would be what would be needed to knock out some of the drought issues we're dealing with in the eastern side of the state. So with all of that kind of as just a setup, a place to begin, let's go take a look at what we're going to be getting in the near term. So I'm going to start this off. This will start off Sunday evening about 7 o'clock, so you can see some of the pieces. For example, this is that low that's just off the coast, and you can see some of the snow here, but we're kind of high and dry behind it. Now, what we're watching is taking shape in the midsection of the country, and I am getting concerned about what this might be doing in terms of thunderstorm activity here on Monday night, Monday morning into Monday night, because that low is going to wrap up into parts of Iowa and Illinois and bring quite a bit of precip, and it might really be producing some relatively stronger storms in that area. But on the backside, quite a bit of snow. Now, you see the next system's coming into California. More snow here. This just continues that pattern. So does this front ever get to us? Well, this is midday Monday. Let's play out there and get into the overnight hours on Monday night into Tuesday morning. And what you'll notice is that by the time we get into Tuesday morning, that front weakly, it's very weak, starts to push across Virginia and North and South Carolina and northern Georgia. So that one's going to bring in chance for precipitation for us. Maybe some embedded thunderstorms out of this one as well. But the time period I'm rocking over here, this is Tuesday morning to Tuesday afternoon and evening. That's when we're looking at that front coming over North Carolina. So at the end of this model run, you notice that one system's curling up the Great Lakes. We have another that's coming out here in the plains. And to see where that one goes, I'm going to flip it over to the European model. Right now, the European model is outperforming the GFS, so we're going to stick with it. So this is the system Monday we just talked about. And then we're going to notice that that front, again, comes over us midday Tuesday, as we discussed, and it's out. The next system that comes behind it, again, another severe weather threat day for the lower Mississippi River Valley and parts of the Mid-South. This is Wednesday evening. We're going to watch that. And then this front does the same, this low does the same thing that so many have done. Make that turn. It just comes out and turns north. So the front is weakened by the time it comes over us. And we don't have the right setup just to strengthen it, to have frontogenesis, to make it stronger, to get more precipitation out of it. So it just kind of weakly goes across the state, because the low's way up here. And that system is where on Friday. Now, if you notice a break in the west. So by middle of this week, the west gets a break. And what's going to happen is the jet stream is going to move into what we call a positive P&A, a ridge over here, and troughing in this area. Now, these troughs that are coming into the midsection of the country don't have the downstream ridge over Greenland or over this side of Canada to just take one of these systems and just boom, run it up the coast and give us a big nor'easter. But the newest model runs starting next weekend are suggesting systems coming out of like the Arklatex region and doing a better job. Notice that. This is next Saturday into Sunday, right there, Saturday into Sunday, bringing a system over the top of North Carolina. Now, at this point, it's pretty far out there to tell you the full strength of this. There is ensemble support for this, which means the ensemble models are picking up in the same thing. But you're going to see that we could get more activity like that. So you see there's one system here next weekend, and then we have another one that follows it middle of the week of next week. You also see some more blue coming in here, which represents snow, but it means there's colder air coming in as well. So let's do it this way. Excuse me. You know that the systems that are coming in are doing this. And therefore, for most of the next 7 days, we're drier. All right. We have two fronts coming through, but as I told you, they're weak. So you're getting below normal precipitation. There will be precipitation, but it's below normal. Going into week 2, we're going to have to watch farther south for systems to start to come up. And this is just the very beginning of them right here. So if we went ahead and just added this up, what we're going to see from the European model, this is the 12Z run on Sunday. So that's the first round. So let's get the timing right here. Monday night through Tuesday morning and midday. So you notice that that one, as it comes through, again, a lot of places picking up less than 0.2 of an inch of total precip. If there is a thunderstorm over your location, you could get a bit more, but it's not much. We then play this out there through Wednesday and Thursday. Remember, we have the next system coming through late in the week. Okay, that next front pushes right in through there. And still, it's more precip over the Appalachian Mountains than anywhere else. So still, we're not looking at a whole lot. We then know that there's another system coming up after this one. There it is. This is that next one, next weekend, the one I'm talking about here. We'll see if that one can deliver a bit more. But as it stands, we have to really wait fully another week before we have a system that might have enough strength and oomph to give us good moisture. And that's because at that point, out there around the 25th, there's that ridge I was telling you about that's coming into the West Coast. Haven't seen this since the beginning of the new year. And just generally speaking, if you have these troughs in the midsection of the country, you at least get a better chance of seeing wetter conditions here. It does help that there's some ridge action in this area. In other words, these kind of tend to pump some moisture in, but they certainly keep it mild. So let me show you the week 2 precipitation anomalies from the European model. So much drier west with the ridge, but with systems diving, we now start to see more activity in this area, maybe a better chance at getting some of this winter precipitation, which we'd like to see. Temperature side of it. Monday's temperatures, lot warmer than we saw on Sunday. Okay, so we're coming in here a lot in the mid 50s. You can see how warm it is in the mid part of the country where I'm expecting some strong to severe storms in this area. That warmth starts to move our way Tuesday into Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be a very mild day for us here across North Carolina. Looking at temperatures maybe 15, 20 degrees above average in some places. And then we see Thursday even more warm. And even the weekend, Friday into Saturday, when a little bit cooler air comes in, it's still 5 to 8 degrees above average. We don't really fully tap into cold air until we get the big ridge out west. But how long is that going to take? Because if we keep a protective southeast ridge, it will ward off any shots at getting some brutally cold air. So let's kind of distill that down. This is day 5 through 10. So I just showed you the next 7 days. Well, let's just go from day 5 through 10. We're still quite mild, even though there's colder air in here. And the pattern is fully reestablished with its new configuration, day 10 through 15. So yeah, a lot colder air comes back into the Canadian Prairie, the Northern Plains, and the West. But again, remember, it's coming up like this and then diving down. So that's where it's pulling in that colder air. The trough set up here, but if we have a southeast ridge, it's going to make things turn. And as a result, we tend to see more mild conditions, which means the east is going to be the last holdout when it comes to the mild air. Now, we went out 15 days. Let's go out beyond that. This is the new CPC outlook for week 3 and week 4. This goes out, whoops, sorry about that. Let's go back there. There it is. This goes from January 28th through February 10th. Now you can see that the CPC has bought into this pattern shift as well. So systems are coming in and they're diving and exiting through the Ohio River Valley. So that means our chances of seeing near normal precipitation are good. We're no longer fully stuck in that dry pattern, but it's not as though it's an overly wet setup for us overall, but better chances at seeing near normal precipitation. Now, will some of this cold air get let out at times? Yeah, it will. But overall, I agree with their assessment here of the East Coast being the last holdout for the warmer conditions. You'll see here, too, that the European model, temperatures on the left and precipitation on the right, is quite similar. But this goes out a bit farther, Jan 25 to February 25, and they've got a larger area in through here over which they're expecting some wetter conditions. So could we see some improvement along those drier climate districts east? We could, but it's going to take some time to really kind of to bring in this new flow. So it's not this week, it could be next week and beyond that we start to see that. Now, let's finish this up talking about the real beyond. And what I want to do is I want to show you the newest data released by the CPC. This comes through Columbia University. And this was what they released last week, looking at the probability of either La Nina, that's in blue, neutral conditions would be in gray, and El Nino is in red. Now, it's a little bit less aggressive as we saw last time. We noticed that by February, March, and April, so our late winter, early spring, the highest probability event is to be INSO-neutral, and that's what it's going to be like through early spring and early, actually probably most of summer. I actually agree better with the fact that we're going to get rid of La Nina, but there's not going to be this instantaneous transition to El Nino. If there is, I agree that it won't be the more dominant factor until you get clear into fall of next year. So this makes a lot of sense to me. But I'll show you the latest ocean temperatures. We are seeing warming showing up here. All right. And while there are still strong trade winds, the westerly winds that have been coming out of the Indian Ocean have backed off a bit. Now, at times, they'll resurge. Remember, La Ninas kind of go out kicking and screaming. So you still see there's still strong trades here, but then they weaken and the westerlies take over, which means that the MJO is going to move over and probably take the more dominant position in the flow of the atmosphere in the tropics. Now, what does all that mean? That means about every 3 to 5, maybe 6 weeks, the pattern is going to make this readjustment as the MJO moves around and it affects the jet stream level winds over us. So I wouldn't ever get settled with one way for the remainder of winter going into spring. But we need to continue this discussion about maybe what spring could look like. So I want to show you the latest data that comes from the Climate Prediction Center, and we're looking at February, March, and April precipitation. You notice that it's most aggressive on this Tennessee and Ohio Valley storm track, but the models are no longer showing the dryness getting through South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. They're trying to keep it closer to the Gulf Coast and here in the western and high plains. And I agree with this because we still kind of have I don't know if you want to call it like a hybrid La Nina setup, where La Nina is not the most dominant factor, but it still seems to have an influence on the MJO, which means we're going to watch how those two features could lead to some high latitude changes in the pattern of the jet stream. That's what we do. Yes, there is the potential for a change in the polar vortex that could affect things. There's a lot of uncertainty as we go forward with this. But the top questions I keep getting asked are, all right, Eric, tell me, what might this mean as we truly get into where we want to plant a crop? So I'm going to take a stab at it. I've already shown the model results in the last few videos, and they're terrible. They're not giving us any information out that far, and that's okay. If they did and they were accurate, this would be a whole different game I'd be playing here. But the graphic you've been looking at is a measure of what we call the Oceanic Nino Index. When it's up, positive, those are El Nino events. When it's down below zero on the horizontal axis, then we're talking about some sort of a La Nina event, weak or moderate or strong. All right, so we're here. And I just said, let's just do a very simple analysis with this. What's happened if I go back all the way back to 1950 and found these times where we were in La Nina and we broke into weak, into neutral, or even weak El Nino conditions. So we look for all the times we made these big transitions up. I just grabbed those years and said, can you just look at those and see what they might mean and stitch them all together? So the years I chose are right here. All right. I'm going to look at spring, and we're going to make a composite map out of them. Now, when I click on this, the map that it's going to create for me is where it stitches all those together and gives me in these shades where it was drier than normal and these where it was wet. Now, you put all that together, and North Carolina is kind of a mix. Okay, a few climate districts were a little bit drier than normal, but that's no sort of a strong signal. In fact, you could even argue that the way this is shaping up, it's not really that strong of a signal either, which means I don't think that anybody can confidently tell you what spring is going to be. And if somebody does and they get it right, I'll just be honest with you, I think it was a good guess. I don't think we can fully tell you what spring is going to look like. And then you say, well, what about summer? Well, let's go in here and just say, let's go June, July, and August. You know, we always worry about that summer heat and summer precipitation. Well, the models, the composites would suggest a drier summer for the eastern half of the country whenever you come out of a La Nina and into an El Nino. Now, what's interesting about this is that goes against what we normally think, right? We normally think of El Nino as being like kind of a big provider. The jet stream is set up to deliver more precip, and this is kind of suggesting it might be the other way. What about temperatures for those years? So let's go here and we'll flip this over for what our summer temperature pattern might look like. And again, when this shows up here, we say, well, wait a minute. We now see cooler conditions here with a greater risk of being warmer in the middle. So what I'm trying to illustrate with this is I feel very confident that the next few weeks are going to look something like this. I wouldn't for a second think that we could tell you what that mid-February pattern could look like. We're watching a few things. Polar vortex disruption happening right now this week. Usually it takes 2 to 3 weeks for that to really manifest itself down to the surface. We're also watching a major change in the Pacific Ocean jet stream. Well, how long does that last? I think it's going to last 3 weeks. It may not last fully beyond that time period or beyond. So we've got a lot of time. And the overall thing that I think we just need to keep in mind is if we come back to where we currently stand on drought, we got this area right in through here that needs to see more moisture coming in. So stuff this in the back of your brains. Let's keep watching it together, and I'll report back to you what I see change between now and next week. Have a good one. Thanks.